Ian is telling me, in 1947, Israel wasn't a country. Through colonialism, land was reclaimed and people were removed from their homeland and deprived of their property due to not being Jewish. From then, the land for those non-Jewish people to inhabit shrunk. Now, it's quite funny having a white American lecture Israelis about their homeland. But the kingdoms of Israel, the kingdom of Judah, existed for hundreds of years before the concept of Palestine was even an idea. The whole term colonialism comes from the Latin word colonia. The Romans, who are European by the way, would conquer a land, erase the indigenous name, and replace it with a new Latin name. When they came to Judea, they erased the term Jerusalem and turned it to Colonia e la Capitolina. They erased Shechem and created instead of it Colonia Neapolis, known today as Nablus. And that is exactly where your Palestine comes from. They erased Provincia Judea to create Provincia Syria Palestina. Now, although Judea was occupied by the Romans and later on by the Byzantines, the Arabs, Crusaders, whatever, Jews always maintained a continuous presence in their homeland for over 3,000 years, always hoping, praying, and even fighting for their independence in their homeland. That is a Great Revolt in the 1st century, that is a Bar Kokhba Revolt in the 2nd century, that is a Kairos Revolt in the 4th century, that is a Heraclius Revolt in the 7th century, and even after the Arab occupation in the 10th century, the Islamic historian Al-Maqdisi wrote about Jerusalem that everywhere the Jews and the Christians have the upper hand and the mosque is void of congregation, meaning that Jews maintained a continuous presence in their homeland even after the Arab occupation. Throughout the entire time, the indigenous people, the Jewish people, continued reading, writing and praying in Hebrew for their independence of their homeland, for their independence of Eretz Israel. But life wasn't easy for them. The Crusaders, the Mamluks, the Ottomans didn't care about the fact that the Jews are the indigenous people of the land of Israel. Jews were massacred in cities like Tzfat, Hebron, Jerusalem. Yet in the 1800s, during the time of the Ottoman Empire, which called the land Syria, Jews began to purchase land outside of the existing cities and to buy land in remote areas, sand dunes and malaria-infested swamps. That land development expedited Jewish return to their homeland from the diaspora in Eastern Europe, Middle East, Yemen. But it also encouraged Arab immigration from countries in the Middle East to the land of Israel. Now, when the British conquered Ottoman Syria in 1917, they got a mandate from the League of Nations to create an entity called Palestine where the local Jews can have an independent home. But the British had a secret agreement with the Arab leader Hussein bin Ali to create an Arab kingdom in the Middle East. What did they do? In 1921, they divided Palestine to two. An Arab country called Transjordan. Transjordan was given to his child Abdallah and Iraq was given to his child Faisal, who initially agreed to restore the Jewish homeland in Palestine, acknowledging the fact that the Jews are the indigenous people of the land. But there were militant factions that called to erase all of the Jews living there. Continuous clashes between the Arabs and the Jews led the United Nations to vote on splitting the remaining smaller Palestine into another Arab state and a Jewish state. The Jews agreed, but the Arabs, that were backed by armies of 5 other Arab countries, initiated a holy war against them. Now, here's a point you don't realize. It wasn't a war between Jews and Arabs. There were many non-Jewish communities who fought together with the Jews against the militant groups. You have the Druze up north, you have the Bedouins down in the Negev. Other Arab villages like Abu Ghosh had a mutual agreement with the Jews not to attack each other. But on the other hand, the higher Arab community gave orders to Arabs to evacuate their homes and to return after all of the Jews are eliminated. For example, in Haifa, the Israelis offered everybody Israeli citizenship, but after 2 days of discussions with the higher Arab committee, many of the people chose to leave and not to accept citizenship because they didn't want to be considered as collaborators. Of course, those who did remain enjoy full citizenship and until today are an integral part of Israel. Nearly 30% of Israelis are not Jewish, and on October 7th, Hamas didn't discriminate between Jews and non-Jews. Many of the people that were killed by Hamas on October 7th were Israeli Arab Muslims, women, children, adults. Hamas knew that were not Jewish and still chose to execute them. Many of the heroes that saved countless lives on October 7th were Israeli Arab Muslims. But here you are, white American, trying to lecture me about the history of my country, trying to paint it as a Jewish colonialism against non-Jews. Pathetic.